I think at this point zombies are so overplayed, they stopped being interesting and unique in video games years ago. And a show like The Walking Dead hasn't been good for seasons now, so a game like World War Z I should hate. But for some reason I really like it and it's managed to be a heap of fun, even though the developers seem to treat my country like second class citizens, by not giving us something as basic as a local server. Yeah folks, World War Z is out, developed by Saber Interactive, and it's yet another in a long line of zombie shooters. Considering the last zombie game I played before this was Overkill's The Walking Dead, which was more disappointing than my foster parents, I went into this one with pretty low expectations. And yet I still enjoyed myself, even though like I said, I probably shouldn't have. Now I've never read any of the books or seen the movie, so I have no idea what the hell is going on. Aside from knowing that it's got something to do with your typical zombie pandemic that's turned society on its head, and also caused your average citizen to pick up a weapon and suddenly be as proficient with it as a Navy SEAL is. There is a story in this, but it's contained to the chapter you're playing. The game's broken down into 4 chapters, all taking place in different cities around the world, so you've got New York, Jerusalem, Moscow, and Tokyo. And all of these chapters then have 3 separate levels, aside from Tokyo, which has only 2, with the 3rd supposed to be added in later on. Along with a patch that's supposed to fix the boatload of issues this game has on release, which all remains to be seen. For each chapter, the characters you play as change entirely, with a completely different roster of people to play as, all of which have their own backstories and histories as to what happened to them before the outbreak.
So when everyone else was leaving, I went home.
It also kind of highlights how the choices and experience they've had through life is what's helped them now that everything's gone to shit. And I think we can all agree that Dina from the Jerusalem chapter is best girl too, right? But these characters are simply cosmetic, there's no difference between playing as any of them. The class system is where things start to get broken down and become a bit more specialised. You've got the Gunslinger, the Hellraiser, the Medic, the Fixer, the Slasher, and the Exterminator. Come on! The main difference between each of these on a surface level is just the equipment they've got. They've each got a different starting weapon, but more importantly, a piece of equipment unique to their class. So for the Gunslinger, he has grenades, whilst the Medic has healing stims. And you kind of genuinely need to put a bit of time into these classes to make them effective. Leveling up the Medic will eventually get it to a point where you can instantly revive someone from a distance with the stim pistol, which is just a lifesaver. Now look, anyone who tells you that they've played and mastered every single class at this point is talking out of their ass. And whilst the classes don't have huge differences or really take that long to master, it mostly just relates to what kind of equipment they use and weapons they start with. But it's kinda hard for me to believe that anyone could have maxed all these out at this point. Like, I've played the game for probably about 15 or so hours before doing this video, and even then I'd only barely scratched the surface of the Gunslinger class, which is kind of like the default soldier build. After that I spent a fair bit of time in the Medic class and I was probably about halfway to maxing both of those out, but I hadn't even touched the others. And I think people who just look at this game and call it a Left 4 Dead clone without really spending all that much time going through the classes are doing the game a bit of a disservice. XP is earned by how far you get into a mission, and what I really like too is that even if you fail a mission, you still get XP earned right up until the point that you lost. And you don't lose all your progress, so you always feel like you're advancing, even if you're still dying over and over. Should be obvious by looking at the footage that this is just a pretty basic third-person shooter, with an emphasis on basic. Like if you've ever played a shooting game before, then this is all going to feel pretty similar. About the only thing that's lacking is a jump or a snap to cover button. The omission of a snap to cover button though isn't really a huge issue because you're not really going to be taking cover when you've got like a couple of dozen zombies chasing after you. And the lack of jumping isn't that much of an issue either because you can vault or climb over most obstacles anyway. There's a whole heap of guns in the game too, which are broken down into separate tiers, and aside from leveling up the class you're playing as, you've also got to level guns up individually. Now, any class can equip any weapon they want, but the gun's not going to be all that good until you level it up and then spend some points on upgrades. And the difference between a level 1 and a level 5 gun is just night and day. Ideally, you want to be leveling up a gun that your class starts with, because the higher levels for guns adds a silencer as an attachment, which makes the earlier parts of a level just much easier, as you don't have to worry about pissing the horde off. Personally, I think the pump-action shotguns and some of the submachine guns are just kinda rubbish, with the assault rifles and the single-shot rifles being pretty awesome. I'm also kinda glad it's not a loot system like in the Vermintide games, where you'd have to grind levels over and over until you got a piece of gear you wanted. In World War Z, you have access to every gun from the get-go, and can level up anything you want. There is a bit of a stealth element to the combat where you can use silenced weapons to prevent drawing too much attention to yourself, but it's never explained in-game just how much noise you're making or how close you are to attracting a horde. About the only indication you get is a character saying something after it's happened, which isn't all that useful. I do kind of wish this had been a first-person shooter, though I understand why they probably didn't want to do this. My guess would be they didn't want it to be compared to the recent The Walking Dead game, which was a complete pile of horse shit. But still, as a third-person shooter, it controls pretty well for the most part, and it's easy enough to pick up and get the hang of. The way this game stands above the rest though is the sheer amount of zombies on screen at any one time. It is absolutely fucking insane at times just how many zombies can be coming for you at once, and it's just downright overwhelming. Frequently throughout each area you've got to hunker down in a certain area for a short period of time, usually while an NPC does something in the background. Before the swarm comes, you can then set up barbed wire fences, you can set up machine gun turrets and electrify fences, and then once the battle begins, all hell breaks loose. And you just get this tidal wave of zombies swarming your position. They're running through barbed wire, they're getting cut to ribbons by turrets, and you whip out a heavy machine gun or a grenade launcher and just mow them down. It's honestly amazing, and I've never seen anything quite like it in a video game. The only time I've ever seen this many enemies on screen at once is in the Starship Troopers game that came out a while back, but that game sucked. Aside from that though, maybe Dead Rising has a similar amount of zombies, but the difference is in that game they're standing still and twiddling their thumbs. The zombies in this though are sprinting towards you and screaming at the top of their lungs. It's almost worth playing the game just to experience that rush you get from seeing this happen for the first time. And the placement of these defensive items actually plays a really huge part in how well you do during these events, especially on the higher difficulties. The coolest moments are when you get these pyramids of zombies, just large piles of them as they scramble on top of each other to get up to your position. It's like this sea of decomposed body parts as this bundle of flesh-eating creatures just starts slowly extending and reaching up to get you. It's just insane, and it reinforces how the zombies have no sense of self-preservation. I think the other cool moment is when they're trying to get over electrified fences and they're all just getting zapped and shredded. I do like the fact that each chapter and level feels different from the last one too, like that's kind of the benefit of having chapters set in entirely different locations. The Tokyo chapter, you're moving through harbour towns and defending yourself against the backdrop of a highway. Then in Moscow, you're moving through a museum, then subway tunnels, and then a finale in a nerve gas plant. It's a pretty damn polished game too in terms of the presentation, like there's some good looking character models, weapon models, there's decent voice acting and mostly good performance. I only had a couple of times when my game stuttered and got choppy, which considering what it's pulling off is pretty impressive.
So many.
Gotta say though, I do wish the game was gorier though. Now I am comparing it to Left 4 Dead 2, which is really the poster child for violent zombie shooters. And I'd say that World War Z is up there, but it doesn't really hold a candle to how bloody and gory things could get in Left 4 Dead 2. Still, there is something kind of cathartic about emptying a full magazine into a pyramid tower of zombies.
One after another!
It's a shame then that this game just seems to hate Australians. And I have to say that if you're a fellow Aussie like me, well, you're gonna be a bit disappointed for the simple fact that there's no Australian servers. There's not even any peer-to-peer. And you're gonna have to kind of deal with that up and down latency. It's kind of ironic that this is the first game I've played since getting broadband internet, with download speeds of around 90 megabits per second and upload speeds of around 40. And now here I am playing this, where I'm getting a ping of anywhere from around 150 up to 300. Kinda reminds me of being on my old dial-up connection and playing Counter-Strike. Levels also frequently bug out and stop you from progressing. At one point we'd fought tooth and nail during a finale during one of the New York missions, barely making it through to the end, and then yet for some reason the event didn't finish. Even though there were no more zombies to kill, we just got stuck. So what we basically had to do was kill each other to make the match end, salvaging what little XP we had. The sad part is this actually happened to me like 4 or 5 times during my first session with the game out of the 10 matches I played. So yeah, like 50% of the games I played were basically for nothing. You can play solo with bots and you won't have to worry about the latency or disconnecting, but playing with bots brings along its own set of problems. Because the bots are kind of brain dead and for some reason they refuse to heal themselves or pick up defensive items. I think they might have done this on purpose though, so it doesn't seem like they're stealing items from the player. I'm also a bit miffed that they've gone for that cliche roster of zombie types. Like you've got your basic runners which you just mow down. Then there's a really sneaky, fast type that pounces on you. There's one that leaves behind a poisonous gas cloud. And then there's a big charging tank type that grabs you and slams you into the ground. I mean, it's so played out. You know what I do like though? How this is just a game about killing zombies. Just zombies. Just seems so many zombie games always make you go up against other human enemies. Bandits and marauders, you know what I mean? Guys who wear motorcycle pads instead of proper body armor. And they spray paint graffiti everywhere and act like inbred psychos. But there's none of that in World War Z, just good old fashioned zombie killing, and I like it. It's not bare bones enough or bug enough for it to feel like early access, but it does feel more like a beta that you'd play like a month or so out from release date. And it's a damn shame because when everything works and you get a solid connection and some mates to play with, the whole thing is so incredibly fun. The longer they take to fix all this stuff though, the worse it's going to be and the more impatient gamers are going to get. And I think the next couple of weeks are really going to dictate if this game is going to succeed or not. They're also going to really need to add in more content because once you've played the few maps on offer, there's not really much else to do aside from just grinding out to level up all the different classes and the weapons. And I'm not even going to waste my time with the PvP until they sort out these servers. There is a really solid foundation here, and everyone I've played the game with has kind of agreed with that. But it's just got a whole heap of minor problems that are super niggling, and the lack of something as basic as peer-to-peer, never mind Aussie servers, is just a really huge fault for a game of this magnitude, and it's something you can't get away with. And I think games like Anthem and Fallout 76 are proof of that. Gamers just aren't going to put up with it, and all of the passive-aggressive moderators you've got on your Discord servers isn't going to hold people off for long. World War Z is still a pretty good game at the moment, but it has the potential to be a whole lot more. Can it get there? Well, I think that's something only time will tell.